Hi, my name is Ailey Chang and I am a student at Boston University. I am currently studying abroad in London as part of my second semester. Being abroad has been amazing so far, and it has opened my eyes to several new ideas. It has been especially great to learn about major historical events through the lens of other countries besides the United States. Throughout the current semester, we have learned about the events of World War I numerous times. We have also been introduced as to how other countries like France, Belgium, Germany, and Britain viewed the war. I also got the opportunity to explore how women were viewed and what key roles they played during the war. To conduct further research, I visited the World War I exhibit at the Imperial War Museum, and I went to see the monuments of two brave women that served as nurses, Florence Nightingale and Edith Cavell. First, I visited the monument of Nurse Florence Nightingale, who died in 1910. A statue honoring her efforts was erected shortly after her death in 1914, before the First World War broke out. Nightingale's statue portrays her with a certain gentleness, as you can see the puffs in her sleeves and the ruffles in her skirt. Additionally, with the overall soft facial expression and sadness in her eyes, you can see her mourning. As a woman and as a nurse, her statue portrays and begs for the involvement in the war. Nightingale's statue thus emphasizes the pre-war mentality of how men should immediately enlist in the army to stop the murder of innocent people. Patricia Farah, author of Women's Science and Suffrage, mentioned that Nightingale was praised because of her traditional feminine portrayal, known for self-sacrifice and the nurturing of men. The next monument I visited was of Edith Cavell. Cavell was a British nurse executed for helping Allied soldiers escape during World War I. She died in 1915, and her statue was erected in 1920 after the war had ended. Although both statues commemorate strong women who took on the brave role of nurses, you can see a clear difference in how the war was viewed before and after. This idea can be found in Paul Fussell's The Great War in Modern Memory. Fussell's thesis entails that the events of World War I were so horrific that it sparked a dramatic change in the Western world, including its language, art, literature, and way of thinking. The romanticized view of war was long gone. People knew the reality and recognized all the damage that had come from the war. When compared to Nightingale, Cavell's statue is more serious and has an almost masculine quality to it, mostly due to the sternness in her face. One can say Cavell is portrayed as a mature, patriotic woman and a mother figure to troops. Some of her last words are engraved at the bottom of her statue, reading, "Patriotism is not enough. I must have no hatred or bitterness towards anyone." Cavell's strong words emphasize post-war attitudes, where the war had created so much chaos and had taken away millions of lives. War was no longer viewed as a romanticized event, and Cavell's monument depicts the gruesomeness. She is reminding us that the war was real, and the hatred coming from it cannot go any further. In the Imperial War Museum, I found several recruitment posters calling for young men to enlist in the army as part of World War I. A popular tactic used for recruitment was the portrayal of women and children as victims. Recruitment posters, such as this one, showed women and children in distress, calling for men to fight in the war. As British historian Joe Fox stated, women were shown as victims of violence in propaganda. By doing so, it drew widespread attention to the barbarous acts against women, which led to public moral outrage. This portrayal was also intended to emphasize how savage the enemies were. This poster I found shows a woman and a child drowning after the sinking of the Lusitania ship. This event caused the United States to finally join the war, and it made Germany become the clear enemy. There is power in this portrayal because it urged that women and children were under threat and required the immediate protection of soldiers. Another exhibit I found at the Imperial War Museum was the uniforms that some women wore during World War I. Because the war had called on so many men to serve, women had to take over the jobs left behind by men. They wore trousers, overalls, and hats since they worked in factories as munition workers and took part in the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps and the Women's Royal Naval Service. As historian John Dipple explains, there was a backlash against women who served in these traditional male roles during World War I. Seeing women in uniforms caused men to resent women because men did not like to see change. To them, women should remain as housewives, taking care of the home and the children. After visiting both the Imperial War Museum and the monuments of Florence Nightingale and Edith Cavell, I learned that women are brave and strong and that they should never be undermined. Without having seen the statues of the two nurses, I would not have been able to grasp how the view of the war drastically changed. Without seeing the propaganda posters, I wouldn't have seen how women were portrayed to the eyes of the soldiers, and I wouldn't have gained perspective as to what kind of uniforms they wore and how their lives transformed because of the war. Studying in London has given me an invaluable experience, allowing me to see things I wouldn't have otherwise.